Hey, and thank you for joining us. I'm Helen Henley, and I'm delighted to be here with Elwyn Robinson. Elwyn is the founder of Lionheart Herbs, the Easy Exhaustion Cure, Complete Detox Academy, Health Coaching Institute, multi-talented and very prolific. Today we are going to delve into the raw food diet. Most people come to the raw food diet because they want to optimize their life or their diet in some way. And so today we thought we'd help you do that by delving into some of the myths and some of the things that you can do to really optimize your raw food diet. So hello, Elwyn, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for being here, Helen, and thanks everyone for listening. It's going to be fun, and we'll learn something, I hope.
I'm sure we will, Elwyn. You've got a TARDIS brain. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to dive into is quite often when people start a raw food diet, one of the things they get very excited about is all the raw cakes and things that you can eat and all the sweet alternatives. Absolutely. I remember doing it myself. And you've been a raw food chef. That's right, isn't it, Elwyn?
Yes, I wasn't a raw food chef for that long, maybe a year or something, but yes.
So, I mean, quite often people go into making these raw cakes and raw chocolate, and there's a whole multitude of sugar alternatives that you can use. And I'd like to go through them and see if there's any ones that are more beneficial or if there's any downside to any sweeteners. So maybe we could start with that, Elwyn.
Yeah, sure. I know this is something that people ask about a lot, and it is actually important. You know, this like having one cake with maybe not the best sweetener ever is probably not going to kill you or even do significant damage. But you know, especially if you're like me and you kind of get into habits of things and you eat the same thing over and over again, just that one difference of selecting like the very best versus one of the worst sweeteners will make a significant difference to your kind of long-term health, but also your immediate quality of life. You know, like the difference, well, for me anyway, and I know for anyone who I've spoken to, between having a blood sugar crash, for instance, and having an energy slump and having a mood slump, and maybe feeling irritable, maybe feeling depressed, maybe feeling tired, all these things, versus not having that happen and having your energy be stable and consistent and your mood be stable and consistent, it's an important thing, you know, so I think it's really important that we're covering this.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the sweeteners that people often first come across, I mean, certainly if you go through some of the older books, I think it's being updated now, but some of the older books are very pro-agave syrup. And could you tell us about that, Elwyn? Do you think that is a good choice as a sweetener for a raw food diet?
Please, you already know the answer to that, but like devil's advocate. Yeah, so I was going to do a big thing about how everybody is different, and so, you know, despite what I'm about to say in answer to these questions, understand that you also need to listen to your own body, and I stand by that statement. That's absolutely true. However, if there's one thing that we can make a blanket statement about, it's that agave syrup is not a good thing. You know, this is something that really I would say intuitively, if you listen to your body, and just to qualify that just for a second, I mean, if your body is very strong, if your pancreas is very strong, if your digestion is very strong, if your hormones are strong, if your immune system's strong, then it's possible, sure, that you could have some agave syrup and feel just fine, right? So this does happen as well. But this is true for everything, you know. It's true that if all of these things are strong, you can have some alcohol and feel fine. It's true if all of these things are strong that you can overeat and feel just about fine. It's true if you have a few lines of cocaine and all those things are true, then you'll be fine. You know, so let's not say that, you know, like these things are definitely going to hurt you no matter what. However, if there's like in the world of food, and I would put agave more in the world of drugs, but in the world of food, yeah, agave is pretty much there because it's basically high fructose syrup, and so. You know, we're probably familiar with the term high fructose corn syrup, and this is known as being kind of the worst of the worst. This thing which is in most of the kind of most nasty sweets and cakes and pastries and all of the like the very worst junk foods, drinks as well, like your colas and your soft drinks, whatever. This is like the worst of the worst. For all kinds of reasons. I mean, it's damaging to the liver because it's big, concentrated, purified. So in other words, there's no nutrients in there that help your body cope with it. Form of fructose, which your liver just can't handle. Really bad for your pancreas as well, which is going to produce a large amount of insulin, which then is going to create a blood sugar crash. It's going to drain and exhaust your pancreas, which, by the way, is your organ related to your will, so not something that we want to drain necessarily. It's going to be something that feeds any kind of negative organism inside you, pretty much any kind, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a yeast, a mold, fungus, even viruses. A lot of them, they seem to be fed by sugar, right? Especially a concentrated form of sugar like this. So, it's pretty much as bad as it can get. Now, even worse, there was a whole scandal. So I kind of always intuitively felt this, as a raw chef, as you said, Helen, quite a few years ago, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I actually refused to use it, despite popular demand. Normally I'm happy to give people what they want, but in this case I made an exception. Despite the fact for instance, I'm not a big fan of raw chocolate, I would still make raw chocolate cakes if people wanted it, because it has some benefits. But I would not use agave, just because to me it seemed like utter poison. A few years ago, this was actually proved to be the case. Dr. McCullough did a big expose on it, even pointing out how the whole agave industry kind of relates to the tequila industry, run by the Mexican mafia. Not the friendliest mafia in the world, even as mafias go. And in fact, a lot of agave syrup, at least your kind of standard store-bought stuff, was actually made of high fructose corn syrup, the corn syrup, the actual, the bad stuff, the stuff that everyone knew was bad. So, like a whole scandal. Yeah, wow. You can look that one up. So, now, I've got some good friends even who, did use agave, and they went to some lengths to prove that their agave was not contaminated by high fructose corn syrup, and it was all like genuine agave and all the rest of it, and fair enough. I believe them. They're high integrity people. But the point is, I believe that all the cases I can think of, they eventually moved over to coconut sugar anyway, because it's just better. Agave syrup, like if you're reading stuff online or whatever that says it's fine, it's good for you, it's probably just old. I think everyone kind of these days knows that it's not. Even the people who defended it for a while, for a couple of years, eventually kind of buckled under public concern about it. But the most important thing, and this is the lesson I want you to get from this, it's not bad because Dr. McCullough said so, or because I said so ever. You just need to listen to your body to know that it's bad. Don't worry about the fact that it was supposed to be low glycemic or whatever. Just have it, and you'll feel it has a kind of detrimental effect on your body. And so a lot of these things are down to dosage as well. I doubt that a quarter of a teaspoon of agave, in combination with a lot of other things, is really going to do much to you, unless you're very sensitive to sugars. But in the quantities that people are using it, and that you really need it for say, a recipe like a raw dessert, like you said, not recommended.
Yeah. I mean, they were, it was like a cup or half a cup, or it was a lot, wasn't it? I remember it myself, and it made me feel quite sick, and it made my children feel sick. And I did carry on eating it for a while, thinking, oh, maybe I need to adjust. And then I just stopped because I did not feel good after eating it. So
there you go. You learn the lesson. That's the thing.
I did.
I mean, sometimes we do have to give the body a chance. I mean, the first time you tried chlorella, you might have felt sick as well. A lot of people do, but quickly you adjust to it, and you're like, oh, this is actually good. So the agave, there's no adjusting to that if you've got a healthy body. It's just sickening.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do you prefer coconut sugar? Why is that a better alternative, Elwin?
Well, I've seen the science on it, but to be honest, for me, it's mainly down to a body fit again. It's like when I have it, it doesn't create an issue in my body. Now, I've got one of these, very fortunate bodies which seems to overreact to everything, So the slightest little thing that most people would probably have a detrimental effect to them, and they wouldn't notice maybe, I'll notice, right? This could obviously be seen as a curse, right? Like, I could easily feel sorry for myself and, oh, my body overreacts to everything, my body feels bad, I have the slightest provocation, it's not fair. I could get into that whole trip. Or I could go, okay, well, there's an opportunity here. And so the opportunity is kind of recognizing quite easily and quickly if there's something that's damaging. Now, all refined sugars, to some degree, are not a good idea. And even a lot of natural sugars, to a lot of people in a lot of situations, are not a very good idea. So just to kind of qualify that. However, if we're in the world right now where we're talking about, you know, maybe my blood sugar is not that bad, right? I'm not diabetic or pre-diabetic. I don't have insulin resistance. You know, I don't have like a mood disorder where I'm flying one minute and like crashed into a pit of despair the next minute, that kind of thing. So I don't have any of this kind of thing going on. My energy's fairly even. And you know what? I want to make a dessert, and you know what? I want to use some kind of refined natural sweetener. Then in that kind of world, we could go, okay, well, what about coconut sugar? And then we could go, well, you know, in a reasonable amount, in combination with other things, and, you know, this is an important thing, and something I teach in all my courses, you know, like, and something that's, I think, quite well known in the nutrition world as well, to not have a load of pure carbohydrate without some protein with it, right, to help create the right hormones being released, and to not have it without some fat with it, just to slow down the rate at which it's released and to slow down the rate at which it taxes the pancreas. But assuming that we're on top of all that kind of thing, which I'm probably not doing justice to, I'm just mentioning as a reminder, coconut sugar seems to be a pretty good option. It's low glycemic. It still does have a decent amount of the different nutrients in it, which allow your body to actually recognize the food for what it is. So it's fairly natural. And yeah, my experience is it just seems to be good. And I guess that seems to be the experience of people in this kind of alternative health world, because as I say, that's why it seems to have taken over from agave syrup in like a lot of uses over the last 5 years or so, because it works.
Yeah, no, certainly I know I don't react to it as much. Again, can't have that
you do the
much.
same.
Yeah,
there is still a question of dosage, right? It is still refined sugar.
Absolutely, totally. And you know, I mean, you can lower your dosage over time, which is what I've done with myself and my family, and it's surprising how little you can actually get away with once your taste buds actually adapt to that. So actually, another thing I want to ask you about, Elwyn, is have you ever tried yacon syrup? I've tried the chewy sort of bits of it, but I've never tried the yacon syrup because it's pretty expensive, isn't it? But I read things about that being very good for your gut and your bowel and things like that. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I mean, yeah, we've always had some of the cupboard for many years. As you say, you know, you kind of use it a bit sparingly because it is pretty expensive. But I would say as much as any syrup is a good idea, and that's a big qualifying statement, right? There's something about a syrup, you know, it's like this sugar that's been refined and broken down, right? So the complexity of it has been reduced to turn it into a syrup. So no syrup is ideal. However, if I must have a syrup, like if a recipe calls for a syrup, then that'll be the one that I use. And it does seem to have lots of health benefits. And again, it doesn't seem to create the same blood sugar imbalance and all the rest of it. The only thing is I've kind of tested my limits with this one. And what I notice is actually my blood sugar is pretty good these days, but certainly a few years ago in the past when it was not so good, if I were to have some yacon syrup mixed with some almonds or cashews or something like that, say, then that would still be a little bit like it's still creating a little bit of a blood sugar spike, but not that bad. Much better than honey, much better than date syrup. Obviously much better than agave, much better than maple, you know, much better than any other syrup that I can mention. So yes, like if you're going to have a syrup, if a recipe calls for a syrup, I'd go for yacon. And yacon powder as well is really good. It's going to be included in the new Super Smoothie Mix when that is finally ready to be released, which is going to be soon.
That's good news.
Yeah, and the actual slices of it as well, the yacon. So the only thing is, because it's a prebiotic, which is a good thing. It feeds the beneficial organisms in your intestines. It can create a little bit of wind.
Okay.
but the syrup doesn't tend to, but the other forms of it can do, the actual, the kind of raw stuff.
The raw stuff, it tastes like, is it part of the turnip family or something? But it tastes like not sweet pineapple. That's how I sort of think of it as tasting. It hasn't got that sickliness of dried pineapple.
Yeah, pineapple, that's definitely what the taste reminds me of, yeah. I used to make those raw chocolates, but with my super smoothie mix instead of chocolate, and then I'd wrap a yacon slice around it, and that was like my favourite food for like, I don't know, a year or two. And I remember when I was touring America, I'd take that everywhere I went, and everyone seemed to enjoy that. Yes. I think it's related to like a Jerusalem artichoke. It's like the sunflower plant. It might be a turnip as well, I'm not sure.
I might be confusing maca, actually.
Yeah, maca is more the turnip one. Yeah, this is like a Jerusalem artichoke, that kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, going back to actually your super smoothie, your raw chocolates, because in that, instead of using a sugar, you actually just blend up some goji berries in it, don't you? And that's really good. Yeah,
and mesquite. I think those are the two main sweeteners of that one. And then we also used liquid stevia as well a lot of the time, and that was really good. So yeah, a few different options. There's loads of different options for sweetener. I'm more surprised when people say, what do you use? I'm like, well, so many things. Where do you start?
And you really like stevia as well, don't you?
I love stevia. Yeah. I mean, I have a stevia plant outside, again, that I'm looking at right now. Sometimes I just pick a little leaf off there and give it a nibble. It's just shocking how, green plant, you expect it to be like sour or usually bitter, but it's just sweet. It's bizarre. So I love stevia. I use the little dropper things. I have that in my tea. There's no sugar in it. It's sweetener without sugar. And it's natural. And, no research has come up with any kind of, what's the word, like hidden, actually, it's got this thing to hurt you.
That was what I was going to ask you. There's no downsides to stevia as far as we know, or you haven't felt any...
It doesn't seem like it. And given what a threat it is to the whole huge sugar industry, I think if they'd have been able to find something, and they would. I mean, these are the guys who even trot out things that are ridiculous, like, antioxidants are bad for you because theoretically, if you have too many of them, that could actually be detrimental. It's like, well, duh, it's true of anything. But so if there's the slightest thing that can be said that's wrong for these things that threaten any established industry like sugar, they will come out with it. But stevia, it doesn't seem to be the case. Like, they haven't managed to find anything yet.
Are there any sort of beneficial attributes that it has, other than that it sweetens things? Does it do anything to your body that's sort of positive?
Yeah, God, it's been a while since I even looked into this. I'm not sure how much I can remember. You might remember something I don't, Helen. I believe it's a digestic tonic, at least partly. I don't remember anything else anymore. Do you remember anything?
No, I'm not an expert on stevia at all, so no, that was why I wanted to pick your brain.
No, it's been a long time since I looked it up. I'm sure if I did, I'd find a few things though.
Okay, well that's homework for both of us then. Okay, so yeah, that's looked into sweeteners, and basically what you're saying is there are some good alternatives, but again, listen to your body, and it is about sort of dosage.
Yeah, can I mention a couple more I use on a regular basis?
Please do, yes.
So there is raw honey. Right?
Yeah.
Raw honey has the benefit of being very sweet, so that's helpful. So it has to be raw, this is the thing. If it's not, it may as well just be another syrup, right? Another refined sugar. However, raw honey, it has the enzymes which help your body to actually digest it and break it down. It has the essentially immune-boosting enzymes, which is what Manuka honey, which most people know about, is famous for. But it's true to all honeys to some degree, although often it's only a slight degree. So it's got those properties. My wife's family are beekeepers, one of the many things that they do. And she said they have a saying in Czech, which is that 1 teaspoon of honey is the best medicine, but 2 or 3 is bad for you. I'm translating it totally wrong, but it was something like that. So the idea is, it's good stuff, but only if you have a little bit. And as soon as you start to indulge in it and behave addictively with it and all that kind of thing, which we all have a danger of with sweet stuff, if we have blood sugar imbalances or if we have parasites like yeast infections, candida, which most of us unfortunately do. But as long as we're not getting to that kind of thing, it seems to have really beneficial properties. I know David Wolf talks about some of the most healing foods in the world, something like that. So, yes, it has something going for it, but the key thing with honey really is dosage. And it is quite high glycemic. It does have quite a lot of fructose in it. So restraint seems to be the key with that. But you know, I might have that, say, on a cracker, whether it's a raw one or an oat one or something like that, and then I'll do like a slice of nut butter. Sorry, not a slice, a spread of nut butter and a spread of honey. That's like a good dose for me, you know. Whereas if I were to make a cake and like pour a cup in there or a jar, like you said, you know, that would be pushing it too far with honey. And then there's mesquite as well, of course. It's not that sweet. Some people call maca sweetener. I'm like, who are you kidding? You know, that's kind of bitter. But mesquite, I'd say, does fall into the sweetener category. It does have a significant kind of caramelly sweet kind of taste to it. Again, on its own, it's probably not significant enough sweetener, but in combination with stevia, maybe a bit of coconut sugar if you want it to be extra sweet, that's like a good combination, you know. So mesquite full of minerals, full of beneficial minerals that we tend to be low on. It's a seed pod, so it's got a decent amount of protein in as well. It's not just pure carbohydrate. So yeah, I'm quite a big fan of mesquite as well. And let's see.
It's meant to stop you have cravings, isn't it? It's meant to. Is it meant to stabilise your blood sugar? Or?
Yeah, I believe that's because it's high, because of the things I mentioned, the fact that it's high in micronutrients like minerals and chromium, and because it's got a decent amount of protein in as well. But yeah, that's true. That's my experience of it. Yeah.
And can you buy it now? Because there was well, I know you've always been able to buy it, but you had to buy it as sort of like bird food or something at one stage, didn't you? They stopped it being advertised as a food.
Well, mesquite is illegal in the UK right now because it's a novel food. But Peruvian carob, also known as algaroba, that one no one seems to have objected to yet. And just between you and me, it's the same thing.
Okay, cool. There you go. So that's an insider tip.
It is, yeah. I don't know if I should have said that, but yeah, that's the deal. So we're going to start using it again. We probably won't be calling it mesquite on the packaging because of that reason. But, you know, it's the same thing. I say it's the same thing. I'm not even clear. It might be a different genus of the same plant, the same species, something like that. But for functional purposes, if not technical purposes, it's the same thing. It's a seed pod from South American and Central American countries that tastes caramelly and has the nutrients and blah, 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 you know. So, yeah, it's a good enough alternative from my perspective.
So, okay. So I'd now like to look at what other things you can actually add to your raw food diet to optimize it. I mean, there's lots of scare stories that you hear, like people saying you won't get enough calcium. Can you expand on that, Elwin? Is that a myth?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Yes.
The only danger with calcium, I believe, is with the raw and vegan, where you're missing your fat-soluble vitamins, especially vitamin D, also A, K, it's E to some degree, though it's not usually the main thing. Then your body isn't able to absorb the calcium. So that's like for every piece of disinformation, there's like a grain of truth to it. So that's the grain of truth. But for most people, it's not the mineral they need to be focused on. You know, the mineral you're most likely to be deficient on is magnesium, which is a partner of calcium. And so if you have problems with your teeth or bones, for instance, it's probably not because you're low in calcium. It probably is because you're low in magnesium. If you're low in calcium, it's probably not because you're not eating enough. It's probably because you're excreting too much. And the reason you're excreting too much is because you're too acidic. And this is where the research has shown pretty conclusively that people who consume a lot of dairy have more cases of osteoporosis than people who do not, or cultures that do not, people in cultures that do not. So how could this possibly be? Well, it's because the dairy contains the acidity, which leaches the calcium from the bones and the teeth and creates this opposite situation. So there is a grain of truth to it, which is the fact that you do need a decent amount of the fat-soluble vitamins, and that it is difficult to get them on a raw vegan diet without supplementation. But there are also the facts that a lot of people not on a raw vegan diet are calcium depleted, and that's because they're overly acidic.
And as you say, they don't have the magnesium.
And they don't have the magnesium, which again relates to like the stress and acidity thing. The more stress we have and acidity we have, the more that our body uses up our magnesium as well. So most people have an excess of calcium stuck in the wrong place, stuck as calcium deposits in all the wrong places, whether it's in their brain, slowly causing Alzheimer's, or whether it's in their arteries, slowly causing a heart disease, or whether it's in their toes, slowly causing gout, or in their kidneys, slowly causing stones, and I could go on and on and on. So it's all collecting and depositing in the wrong places where your body's trying to protect itself from the acidity with calcium, which is a very alkaline substance. So we have a deficiency of it in the wrong place, but we've got loads. We've got a deficiency of it in the right place, but we've got loads of it in the wrong place. And so, we need to focus on all the other things that go with it that help us to use and absorb it, like the fat-soluble vitamins, like magnesium, also like boron. But really, all the minerals. Zinc has a component with calcium as well. So, not the number one thing to start with. And there's loads of it in the kind of standards foods that raw vegans eat. There's loads of it in greens, loads of it in sea vegetables. Yeah.
So what would be the best way to supplement, say, the magnesium and the fat-soluble vitamins for someone wanting to have an optimal raw food diet?
It's a good question. Magnesium can be tough. It's food form. Famous is cacao, chocolate. But the challenge with that one is it's causing as much stress to the adrenals as it's kind of replenishing the magnesium. So if you're already starting off perfectly, it will pretty much just replace what it's taking. I've seen, reports of people resolving a magnesium deficiency with large amounts of chocolate. I'm not sure if that's true, but I'll give it the benefit of maybe it's possible. Generally, though, the research seems to indicate that once someone's deficient in it, as most of us are, it's actually really difficult to get it back again. And so the best way and this is because your body has problems digesting it. Your body has problems absorbing it through the intestines for the simple reason that if you have a lot of it in your intestines, it starts to create exaggerated peristalsis in the intestines, which basically means it acts like a laxative. It draws lots of water towards it, and then it causes the muscles to relax and move. So, it's very hard to get enough just by consuming it with anything, whether you're talking about consuming a supplement or whether you're talking about consuming a natural food. So the other way is and the way that it seems to work is either to have an injection or to have it transdermally, which means through the skin. And so, obviously transdermally is going to be the preferred method for a lot of us. I actually like to go for both these days. I recommend both. I recommend people do it transdermally and they consume as much as they can tolerate without it having a laxative effect. For the simple reason, most people are kind of blocked and constipated and their intestines are kind of dried up and kind of blocked. So it's not the end of the world if you accidentally have a bit too much magnesium in your intestines and it gives you a good clear out. So you kind of, you may as well have some internally and some externally. That seems to be the best thing. And assuming that you're not deficient, like the best food form, I would say, is definitely sea vegetables. There's loads in sea vegetables, especially like the black ones, like hajiki, arame, wakame, kelp. Well, those are mainly black anyway. Those are like really, really, really high dose. And when I said really, really, I mean really, really. It's like a super concentrated, super powerful, way more than you'd get in any other kind of natural foods. And then, nuts and seeds and all that kind of thing have a decent amount of it as well, and greens do.
And saying that if you're not deficient, well, I read a study by the World Health Authority, and it was something crazy, like the high 70 percentile of people are deficient. So the chances of you not being deficient are very, very slim, on whatever diet you're on, unless you are supplementing it in some way or being extra careful with your sea vegetables.
Yeah, unless you have a very natural diet. Basically, if you live in the earth, so if you you live with the earth. So if you eat a naturally high nutrient diet and you live a natural life in tune with the seasons and you don't get involved in all the busyness of the world, then you probably don't need magnesium supplementation. But if you live in the city, if you eat city food, and more importantly, if you live a city lifestyle, you're always rushing about, you're always stressing, you're always worrying, you're not sleeping enough, you're not sleeping at the right time, you're overeating, all of that stuff that stresses you, you probably need some magnesium.
So what about the fat-soluble vitamins as well? How would you best supplement those in a optimal raw diet?
Yeah, so this depends partly on if you're being vegan or not. If you're not, you can go for some dairy foods, particularly butter, because it's in the fat. So generally, the damaging parts of dairy are the sugars and the proteins in different ways, which I won't go into too much, but those are the things that tend to bother people. So if you have a pure fat, like a butter or ghee, that will have those vitamins in without the things that tend to irritate people. If you're not vegetarian even, but you just want to have like an optimal diet and eat raw, then you can go for bone broths, which I know aren't raw, but I guess they're a liquid, not a solid, so you could excuse it and call it a tea or something if you want. I don't know. But that's another option. Not something I've ever done, by the way, but I know something that I've had a lot of clients has worked well for them, so I thought I'd mention it. And then, of course, there's just supplementation, which I consider to be the simplest option. A lot of people, I think, have a lot of moral objection to supplementation, like, oh, I should be able to, But I don't think there is such a thing as should. I mean, we just live such unnatural lives. We live in an unnatural world. Everything about what we do is unnatural. The foods we eat are not in season. They're not from the country that we live in. The people that we meet, are not living natural lives. The routine that we're on, the way, everything is unnatural. So given that we are living totally unnaturally, it's hardly a surprise that given that the raw vegan diet is unnatural, given the way we live our life, given our environment, irrespective of whether we believe that, it was the right thing to do and what everyone did hundreds of thousands of years ago, it's certainly not natural right now. So, why not have a supplement that supports it? I think a good vitamin D supplement, I like a sublingual one, sublingual D3. That seems to work best, go straight into the bloodstream without your body having to digest it. For vitamin A, E, K. For vitamin E, I really like a kind of natural form, which is tocotrienols, which is a soluble rice bran. So it's not really a supplement. It's really nice, by the way. It's one of my favourite sweeteners, is tocotrienols.
Okay.
I actually eat it by the tablespoonful when we have it around. It tastes delicious to me. And it's like a really super concentrated source of vitamin E. The fat-soluble vitamins, your body actually stores them. So they're not the kind of things that you must have every day. However, there's also things you need to be careful of. Like probably the highest source of vitamin A is, the animal source of vitamin A is liver. And it's so high that you actually have to be careful to not overfeed people or animals it, because they can die through vitamin A toxicity. It's one of the few nutrients that there's an actual chance of dying of having too much. Iron maybe is another example. And it's not true for most of the nutrients, so it's interesting. So that's the thing is, unless your body is really not functioning very well, and of course it's possible, but unless your body's not functioning very well, you can make vitamin A out of the carotenoids, right? So beta-carotene, alpha-carotene, and this is found basically as a broad sweeping statement in all the foods that have either a red, orange, or green colouring, which is a lot of them, So, like goji berries are famously high in beta-carotene. So are carrots, but so is like kale and spinach and all of these kind of foods. All of these have decent levels of these carotenoids. As long as your body is functioning okay, it can turn that into retinol. And kind of pro-vegan proponents actually say your body uses it better, while pro-meat eating people say your body, struggles with using it. But whatever is the case, I mean, the bottom line is you can get by. I mean, I've never eaten or taken an animal form of vitamin A in my life, and I'm doing great. So, I know it's certainly possible. So I would just be aware of that. Unless, of course, you are showing signs of deficiency of it, then maybe there's a possibility your body is not able to to make that conversion, in which case you could go for something like your butter or ghee to get the animal version, or get a supplement. There are animal supplements, like a desiccated liver is an example of a supplement, not popular maybe with some of our listeners, but that is a way of getting, like...
Yeah, not popular with me, yuck.
No, but it is a way of getting a decent amount of animal source vitamin A if you actually need that. And arguably, having a small amount of a supplement like that from an ethical source is better than eating large amounts of animal food, which other people will turn to, right? So it's kind of questionable, yeah.
Yeah, too many memories of being force-fed liver as a child for me to even go there. So going back to the butter, am I right in thinking that there's a specific type of butter that is best, that it has to be pasture-fed, that it has to be a yellow colour? Is that right, to get the best benefits?
Yeah, I mean, the least we want to aim for is organic, right? That's just like an absolute definite. I don't know if raw is very commonly available. I don't know if I've even seen it before. I've heard people talk about it, but I'm sure it must exist. But I have not seen it. Again, that would be ideal because it would still contain lipase, which should help you digest the fat. So that would be good. But like I say, that's not something that I would limit myself to because I've never seen it. And then definitely grass-fed, pasture-fed, because, the animal foods, the benefits you get are from the nutrients they have. Plus, as I've indicated, the vitamin A originally comes from green or red or orange coloured foods. So if all the animals have been eating is a bunch of yellow coloured or white coloured grain and soybeans and stuff, then it hasn't got the raw material to make the vitamin A. And they'll still make some, but I mean, like if you want some decent high vitamin A butter, then you need it from animals that have been eating grass or greens.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to talk about essential fatty acids now, Elwyn. Are they abundant on a raw diet, or would you need to supplement those?
No. And not only are they not, I mean, you're talking about omega-3, I imagine, and specifically the EPA and DHA, which are the long-chain versions. So the medium-chain versions are not abundant, but there's a few foods you can find them in and you could get enough. So they're high in chia seeds, they're high in hemp seeds, and they're high in flax or linseeds, which obviously isn't like a huge range, but it's enough. You could simply have those every day, and that gives you your omega chain and omega-3s. I assume I don't need to go into detail about all of this. People assume that they've heard it before, so I'm just kind of giving a reminder here. But we need omega-3, and we need omega-3 in balance to omega-6. So the challenge with a raw vegan diet, or one of them, is that we have loads of omega-6 generally, because we need to get calories from somewhere. We'll tend to get calories from nuts and seeds. It's one of the only options. And they tend to be full of omega-6. And so we tend to, as much as everyone is deficient in omega-3s, people eating a standard diet, people eating a healthy carnivorous diet, people eating an unhealthy carnivorous diet, people eating a vegan diet, everyone is deficient in omega-3 relatively in this day and age, pretty much. But we tend to be especially deficient in the raw vegan world, in contrast, because we have so much omega-6, which we need to balance with omega-3. So it's something that I would say, you must supplement. Occasionally I get emails I'm really in a budget, I can only afford, one or two things, something like that. What supplements do you recommend I take? That's pretty much always the answer. And it's clear to me that someone, specifically needs something else. That's going to be my general go-to answer. We must have this because so many reasons. Again, we could do a whole call on the values of omega-3, but we need it. We need it to live, we need it to think, we need it to function, right? So, and we need to reduce pain, it reduces inflammation, so important. Most of us are living in this kind of state of chronic, pain to some degree or another in various ways. So we need it. So if you're committed to being a vegan, which is awesome, then you can get some good food state from marine phytoplankton that has all the other kind of nutrients with it, which allow you to absorb it well, like the phospholipids. So that's really good. But to get your bulk amount of it, just really only the last couple of years, there's been a vegan option for that. And it's algae oil. We sell it on the site now. It's EPA and DHA in a pure vegan form. Really, really good. So I actually use that one. It's awesome. It's made a big, big difference to my level of clarity. That's the thing I've noticed especially. Really, really good. And then, of course, there's pure fish oil, whether it's krill oil or like a pharmaceutical grade fish oil. Either of those are good. The good thing about krill oil is it contains the phospholipids again, which are also good for your brain and which allow you to absorb the omega-3s better. The good thing about a pure fish oil would be that it has just more bulk, EPA and DHA. And so a combination of both, I would say, would be best. To either have marine phytoplankton and algae oil, if you're a pure vegan, or to have a combination of krill oil and fish oil, if you are into having animal foods.
Yeah, totally, Elwin. So, actually, another thing I would love to pick your brain about, because, again, this is in all the books on being raw, is people love nutritional yeast. And it's added to so many things, your kale chips, your cheese.
I used to love cigarettes.
Ah, it's that good, is it?
Well, no, I'm just pointing out, like, people love it, but I think there's a difference between the way that people love, I don't know, goji berries or kale, for instance, without the nutritional yeast, or whatever, versus the way that people love nutritional yeast. And the way that people would love nutritional yeast is addictively, right?
Okay.
It's more. It's like Pringles. Once you pop, can't stop. And so there is a literal correlation between those two things, because, so I think everyone's heard of MSG, or almost everyone. If you haven't, it's a neurotoxin which excites your brain and makes everything taste a lot nicer than it actually does. Tricks your brain by overstimulating it. Sounds good so far, except for that those brain cells are overstimulated, then exhausted, then break down, and so overall it's damaging the brain, basically. It's a mild, but if done persistently, significant amount of brain damage. And it leaves you in a state where you need to be overstimulated again in order to feel something again. So in the same way that, say, an addiction to methamphetamine kind of makes life boring and not worth living if you're not on it, so MSG makes food boring and not worth eating if they don't contain it, right? So it's a kind of dangerous, vicious circle. Now, nutritional yeast doesn't quite have MSG, but it has high levels of refined glutamate, which is basically a component of the MSG. And MS stands for monosodium. So if you're having sodium chloride, which is obviously salt, which you would usually in foods that contain nutritional yeast, and then you're having this high glutamate, it's very, very similar and very, very close to that same addictive thing that you get from foods that contain MSG. So that's why I don't recommend it. And again, I wouldn't expect anyone to believe me about that. And if you're in a position where you can just have a little bit of a food that contains MSG, you don't have that feeling like you're kind of overstimulated, you don't have that feeling like you just want to carry on eating it until it's all gone, fair enough. But if you observe closely, I think most people notice that's actually why we feel the way we do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't use it just because I never got into it. So that's good news. But it's prolific out there, isn't it? It's yeah. Yeah,
it's kind of a design flaw in human beings that we like to be stimulated, and it's not such a bad thing in the natural world because the things that stimulate us are few and far between, and it just gives us a few little peak experiences to kind of hark back on. But of course, in this modern world, we have an absolute abundance of food. But more than we have an abundance of food, we have an abundance of drugs. We have an abundance of stimulants. Like literally, we can buy we can keep ourselves stimulated to the degree that any of the most powerful kings and emperors would only be able to dream of even a few hundred years ago. That's the ready availability of stimulants in this day and age. And believe me, those kings and emperors, they did contain quite a lot of drugs, but still, we can do more. As that's a very dangerous position to be in. So, we have a liking. We're not the only ones. Human beings seem to be especially, we seem to be especially keen for it for all kinds of psychological reasons. But, you know, it's been documented that animals do it as well to some degree. They come across some plant that's stimulating and slightly poisonous to them, they'll kind of gorge on it. Generally, they won't kill themselves with it like we do, but they you know. So this is just a thing that we need to be aware of. And so if you do have that addictive kind of sense with anything, it's a really good idea to question that. The other thing is it might not be a drug, but it might be something you're intolerant to, you know? So you might feel that way about, I don't know, bread. A lot of people do, you know? And it's not that bread is a drug per se, but it's the fact that gluten, because your body is allergic to it, it stimulates your adrenal glands, so it kind of acts like a drug, and makes you feel high temporarily, and then gives you a crash and makes you crave more. So yeah, we want to watch out for all types of drug reactions within us, and just, you know, be really, really careful.
I love that, you know, it's empowering people to have some knowledge and then to really refer it back to their own body and what works for them, and because most people going onto one of these sort of optimal diets, they really want to feel good, they really want to optimize their life, and as you say, there is some old and some false information out there, and being empowered to run it through your own knowing is just the best place to be, really. So that's something we could probably do with avoiding in our diet, nutritional yeast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want it to be, oh, God, Elwin's giving me a load of things I can't have it because Elwin said so. It's just about, well, you know, just don't have nutritional yeast or agave or whatever because some raw guru told you it's good for you and then ignore what your body says, you know? Just be aware of what they've said, be aware of what I've said, actually test it in the lab with your own body and then see what the real situation is for you.
Absolutely. Something else you could test in the lab of your own body would be ferments, and they're a really good thing to add to a raw food diet. I would definitely
agree. You would be referring to fermented foods and drinks like sauerkraut and kimchi or kombucha and kefir, I assume?
Absolutely, those are the ones.
Yeah, so we've done a few interviews on those recently, so I'd refer people back to those for like the detailed skinny on why they're so awesome. I guess the way that they relate to a raw food diet, well, there's a few different ways. The thing that comes to mind for me immediately is that they help you to digest, right? And so for a lot of people, if they're eating only raw food, there's a lot of fiber that they're not used to digesting, and this is, you know, one of the things often people their digestion, not always, sometimes it's the opposite, but a lot of people, their digestion, you know, really struggles when they start to eat a lot of food, especially if it's a lot of raw salad, a lot of raw vegetables. And so sauerkraut can really help with that, to break those things down. Of course, it can help to break down the backlog of all the toxic stuff which has been building up in there. But the most magical thing about sauerkraut, and maybe not something you can rely on, but something you can plan for long term is, well, not just sauerkraut, but all the ferments, is that slowly, as they start to colonize your intestines, they'll actually start to produce a lot of this stuff for you. And so you don't have to worry so much. And I know this is a controversial statement. Again, I wouldn't like bank on it, but for instance, like one of the nutrients we haven't talked about yet is vitamin B12. That's something that is famous that you know, a lot of vegans can become deficient in, but actually I think it's 30 or 40% of people who eat meat are also deficient in it, so it's quite a universal thing. The main reasons for deficiency of vitamin B12, a lot of people think it's like contained within meat or something like that. It's not the case. It's something that is created by bacteria. And so the reason why animal foods, you know, have high vitamin B12 and vegan foods do not is because animal foods are high in bacteria, right? That produces vitamin B12, that's it. So creating a situation, and I'm not saying like sauerkraut, I believe it takes 6 to 8 weeks of fermenting sauerkraut, for instance, before it starts to produce B12. So it's not necessarily a reliable way. Certainly don't rely on it if you're deficient. But it is something to be aware that long term, the more that you eat fermented foods on a daily basis, more importantly, so long as your intestines are clear and they can be recolonized by these good bacteria, they'll actually be able to create, not all, but a lot of these nutrients which otherwise you might be deficient in.
Fascinating. That's amazing, isn't it? That's, again, really empowering, a way of taking our health back into our own hands.
Yeah. and I don't want to make like claims which have not been substantiated, but there are theories that this is a lot of the reason for a lot of the things which modern science finds inexplicable. You know, like the examples of people who don't eat for extended periods of time. And I don't know what you believe. Maybe, you know, do you believe people are going years without food or months or whatever? But, you know, there have been these stories throughout history. There are these stories still today of these people who don't eat maybe, or perhaps who eat very restricted diets, you know. And of course, there are these stories that we see all around us of the odd exception. It's not the majority, especially these days, but the odd exception of someone who eats a really unhealthy diet and still seems very healthy, right? And you know, one possible explanation for all of this is that for whatever reason, through luck, through genetics, through having it passed on from mother, probably more likely, they have good intestinal colonies, the microbiome that we talked about in the previous interview, and they're actually able to create the nutrients they need, or rather these organisms inside them are, in order to maintain them. So this is not something we want to underestimate. So in the short to medium term, I'd say yes, you know, go for these supplements. Make sure you're getting what you need. But you can also have a plan that, you know, long term, my ultimate goal is just to have incredibly powerful digestion, an incredibly healthy microbiome, so that I become less and less dependent on external things and more able to be self-sufficient.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to look, actually, talking about getting it from your mother, at how you were born and if you were breastfed, because that does have a major impact on the health of your gut and your microbiome. And if you didn't have a natural birth and if you weren't breastfed, then that is one reason why you might not have a really good population of healthy bacteria, and you might want to prioritize that in your health, because it does make an enormous difference.
Absolutely. And if you suffered from major stress and if you've had some kind of infection which has required antibiotics, those are other good reasons. Yep.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So is there anything else you would like to highlight, Elwyn?
Let's see. I think we've been through the major nutrients now. We mentioned B12 briefly.
Yeah.
There's also vitamin K, which we kind of mentioned along the fat-soluble vitamins. So, yeah, I think in terms of nutrients, I think we have it covered. There's also choline. That's the only other thing. I mentioned it very briefly when I talked about phospholipids. This is something that's especially necessary for the brain as a building block of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which is what your brain's memory molecule, basically, how you think. So very, very important. And generally, again, choline is not found in vegan food in any significant quantities. Now, because it's fat-soluble, your body does have quite a store of it. And so this doesn't tend to be such a problem for adults, but it's especially with children that this is like a potential red flag for. Like if you raise a child completely vegan, then they don't have the choline that they need, not just for the brain, but also to every cell your body contains and needs choline. So this is like an important thing. So to make sure you get those phospholipids in decent quantities, you can get a decent amount in marine phytoplankton, but you need to have quite large quantities of it, larger than most people would really take in practice, especially because it's so expensive. Lecithin is probably the cheap and simple thing that most people can go for. It is a soya product, but I'm not a big fan of soya. Most people probably know that. It's not good for them. They may have heard my opinions on it. So, however, you know, soy, especially if you're a long-term vegan or if you have a child who's vegan, to give them some lecithin. And of course, if you're not a vegan but you want to be raw, then egg yolks are probably the most concentrated source of it that you can have or give your child to make sure you don't become deficient in that, because that's important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What about sunflower lecithin? Is that any better than the soya?
Yeah, there seems to be something different about it. I can't remember what it is now. Look into it. I can't remember why I decided that soya was better, despite my opinions on it. Right now, because again, all of this is kind of off the cuff today. We decided to do it impromptu. So a couple of times we may just be giving you leads to follow yourself. But yeah, it's a good point. So if you do strongly object to soya, you can look into sunflower, see if that suits your purposes.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I hope you have all enjoyed this interview, and if you have any comments, any objections, any future topics that you would like us to cover, any area of your life that you would like us to discuss and optimize, then please leave a comment in the box below, and it is greatly appreciated by us. So I think we've been going for about an hour now, Elwin, so it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's been a long one again. Longer than we planned, but I wanted to make sure that we covered everything that was necessary. So what I really want is for anyone who maybe is embarking on a raw food diet, who hasn't heard this kind of stuff before, that you've at least got a starting point in everything, right? I'm not saying I'm giving you the final word, but I would say there's nothing in here, that you're going to be incomplete about. This is all the stuff that you need to know to get started, to make sure that you do it safe. And I recommend to do so. Don't follow the blind thing of, because someone said it's good, it's just 100% good, and as long as I eat raw food, everything is going to be great. Because I wish life were that simple. It's not. But having said that, having a raw food diet, or 100% raw food diet even, certainly for a period of time, like a few weeks, a few months, maybe even a few years, it's like a really good thing for the body in a lot of cases. Very highly cleansing, purifying, rebuilding your body from like good building blocks. There's a lot good about it. But like with anything, it's about doing it carefully. I mean, there's a lot good about being able to drive, but you do need to make sure that you know the rules of the road so that you don't kind of get killed. Something along those lines.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love raw food, and I think it's such an amazing thing to include in your diet and in your life. And it is such an amazing antidote to the standard diet that is out there. But it is, as you say, really good to take all these things into account. And I mean, even just learning about agave and nutritional yeast, that's like a big one, because a lot of the books out there, they don't have this updated knowledge. So it's really this quest to empower yourself and to make the best choices for your body and for your life. And that's what we're here for.
And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, God, where do I start? I don't know who to trust. It's all so difficult, it's so complicated. Let me just bring it back to something really simple for you. Like, listen to your body. Your body may not always give you the right answers when it comes to eating the good food. Like I say, you might try chlorella for the first time and your body's like, ugh, maybe it needs a chance to adapt to it. Or, say for greens or whatever. But, if you try something like agave for the first time, your body goes, ugh, and then it carries on going, ugh, several times. There's not something you need to adapt to. You can listen to your body pretty much the first time and go, you know what? Never mind, I won't have that anymore.
Totally. So thank you, Elwin. It's been fascinating as always. And please leave comments underneath, any objections, any inspirations you have, anything you'd like to share. We'd be really delighted to hear about it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your sharing, because it's what keeps us going. We're still going, we're going to carry on going. But we are fueled by all of your interaction. So we really appreciate that. And thank you so much to Helen for doing this. Thank you to everyone for listening. And see you next time.
Bye-bye.